Hello and welcome to the Social Recruiting Show. I'm Katrina Collier. I'm, of course, author of the Robot Proof Recruiter, and I'm a candidate engagement speaker and facilitator. Good to know everybody has a copy, and if they don't, they know where to get it. I'm, of course, joined by my gorgeous co-host, Glenn Martin, who is a very talented talent acquisition professional. Won't let me say what his actual job title is because it's longer than mine. And today we are super excited to bring Louise Triance from UK Recruiter back to the show to talk about speaking for all and what that meant and 1 year on and where we are. So welcome to the show,
Welcome
Louise.
to the show, Louise.
Thank you very much for having me.
I'm loving your badge. Which one are you wearing?
I'm wearing I give great feedback. What does yours say, Katrina?
Don't ghost me, which goes quite well with I give great feedback, doesn't it? Because this is the no feedback.
Quality. So for the very few people that don't know you, Louise, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I run a community for recruitment people, for agency in-house recruiters, done that for 21 years. So we do events, a load of online stuff, ton of chat about what's going on in the recruitment space. So some of it's for newbies, for startups, or people joining the industry, and some of it's for us old veterans in the space.
And obviously you started doing that when you were 10.
Yes, when I was 7 years old, I started those figures.
Awesome.
So obviously you came on the show with Audra, and it's about a year ago, isn't it?
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
And we were talking about Manels.
Which is a phrase, actually, until you wrote it the other day, Glenn. I'm not sure I've ever heard anyone say that. I totally get what it is. Say it again.
Manels.
Manels. I can't say it.
Panel.
Male
What we're
panels.
talking about is male panels.
Yeah.
And that could be the entire conference is just mostly men, as in all the speakers, or it could be an actual lineup. I mean, that we've certainly seen lineups of talking about diversity and inclusion. The entire lineup is pale male. So crazy.
So just to kind of start it off, this segues neatly into your Facebook group, Speaking for All, Louise. Just tell us a little bit about that and kind of the catalyst behind it, please.
Okay, well, the actual Facebook group was Katrina's idea, not mine. But the conversation was between us. You can take full credit for that. The conversation was between us. It's interesting. I'm not sure what started us off. I think probably a lot of private conversations between the two of us saying, have you seen this lineup? Have you seen this lineup? And we both organise events. So I've had speakers on stage for probably 12 years now. And I don't think I've ever, until maybe the last 3 years, tried to be diverse. I think that I would say on balance, I just was, I think. But it just seemed to be coming to the fore more and more. I don't know whether it was something external which was a catalyst or whether we just got sick of it, Katrina.
I think we just got fed up. I mean, I now suffer the reverse problem because obviously a lot of the events I run are for Disrupt HR, so they're more HR focused, and you're running recruitment. So we've had this whole thing about there are fewer female speakers in recruitment, and I've got far more women. So actually sometimes I'm sitting the other way. Like right now I'm organising December 3rd's London event, and I'm going, oh my God, I need more women. So I've gone that way. So it swings, but I mean, I think awful sometimes it feels like a checkbox exercise or tick box. But it's so important.
And that's the risk, I think. I think that historically, on balance, I was doing okay, and you would have been too. I think that there's two things here. One is some people definitely weren't doing okay. So some people, and what we're talking about here to start with was just gender. That's what Katrina and I were talking about to start with, was were there more men than women? And I have definitely seen a year ago, there were so many panels which were men. There's a photo of an event where there was 5 men on the panel. There was a male host of the whole event who was stood to one side of the stage, and there was the bloke who was running the panel. There was 6 men. I mean, that's just not all right. There's no excuse for that. I mean, unless it was about prostate cancer and they were all men talking about it. It wasn't an excuse. And I
so when we're talking about recruitment, and the population is pretty well 50-50, it's not quite, so, but you're going, well, we should be representing the people in the audience.
Is that right? Is it a kind of 50-50 split in terms of the industry from a male and female perspective? I always got the impression it was
overall,
a lot more kind of male-centric on the recruitment side, and perhaps that was maybe a reason for the kind of two male-heavy kind of panels.
Agency owners. Yeah, well, yeah. But I guess possibly there are more agency owners of large agencies are probably men, in line with the fact that there's, I don't know how many Bobs there are on male Fortune 500 panels. I don't know, but there's certainly lots of senior women in the recruitment agency space, and in HR functions,
in-house,
there are
heads of talent.
Tons of very senior women. And I think that, and I guess this comes on to another point, is why you choose the people you choose to be at an event. But if you make no effort to look for people with diverse knowledge, you're going to get the same John speaking on your panel.
So, I mean, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I mean, it does take, I think, I mentioned pre-show, I wanted to say this, but that we can only do so much as well. So one of the reasons we wanted to have the group was to encourage new speakers. So we can ask, and then they say no. So you guys both know that I got that very passive-aggressive email from somebody who works in the disability forum in Bristol about my event. And I'm like looking, going, well, you can't tell from the speakers if someone has a disability or not, because sometimes it doesn't show. But also that thing is, I've done so much work, but if I ask somebody who's disabled and they don't want to speak, what am I supposed to do? Like, we can only do so much. So I think that was a bit of the hope of the group, was to create a safe space for people to learn and to grow and to try and put themselves out there and have a first dig at being on stage.
Yeah, and that is the other side of this, is that as an event organizer, you could ask a load of women to speak and they wouldn't all necessarily say yes. And I can tell you categorically that I have had more women decline to speak than men. That is my experience. I have had more women pull out who have agreed to speak than men have, although I have been badly let down by many people for many reasons. But I think if somebody is going to pull out, it has, for me, been more often women. And I think the reasons behind that are complex. And I think that some of them go back to stuff which is completely outside of the workspace, which is around roles and responsibilities. So I had a woman who pulled out from an event because her ex-husband's father was critically ill and she wanted her son to go to see him before his granddad died. Now, I could be making a sexual stereotype here, but I felt that she was doing that as a mother in a nurturing role. And I've got other examples like that where, you know, a child's been ill and so the woman hasn't been able to speak.
I've had that.
Yeah, and I think that the whole makeup of relationships and responsibilities possibly makes it more complex for women to speak. Having said all of that, there's ways to get around that. So, you know, I've had women who don't want to speak, and I've had to think about ways to make that happen. So, no, don't really have to come to day one of the event. Just come to day two. No, you don't have to stay overnight. I'll put you on slightly later in the day, or I'll put you on slightly earlier so you can get away. And if you don't have those conversations, you just, and the person says, "Oh, it's not going to work for me," and you go, "Okie dokie," then you're never going to help them.
Sorry, does that come with experience? So if you think about some individuals that are, you know, maybe the first couple of events, they're basically dipping into their immediate network and they're just drawing down on people that they know. And that sometimes could be, you know, quite a few more males than kind of females. And they may not know that, you know, say for instance, if somebody sort of withdraws, that they could offer these different sort of solutions. It's kind of like, oh God, they've withdrawn from the event and, you know, kind of, I have to fill that immediately. So do you think that comes with experience? Both of you actually, that come with experience and time to sort of understand that and maybe have a bit more
some
experience?
of what Louise was just saying came from being a mother. See, I wouldn't have thought of some of that even now.
No. I suppose that's the thing, isn't it? We all draw on the stuff we already know. But having said that, Katrina, if someone was having trouble speaking at an event and you really wanted them to speak, I mean, you're in a different position to me.
Yeah, it's an evening event.
Yeah, and people, you run a similar event every time. They know what to expect, and you are inundated with speakers. For some
In
of the
London.
events, but for some of the events I organise, I'm actively going out seeking people, and I think probably I have to work a bit harder to do that. But Glenn, what you just said there about, I have total sympathy for people running their first events. It is really difficult. If I was running an event and nobody knew me and nobody knew my event, I would pick people who were well known to speak, and unfortunately more of them would be men. And I totally get that. However, plenty of women do speak at events, and plenty of women are well known. There's one right here on screen with us. So, you know.
Oh yeah.
It's funny because while you're saying all of this, I was thinking about how I got started speaking, and I just think I was really, really audacious, and but it was still terrifying. So I still had the empathy, but I kind of understand. I was thinking, well, how did I? And I pitched it to Mike Taylor when he ran the social media recruitment conference. I'll never figure that. What I was thinking, getting up in front of 300 people for my first speaking gig, I do not know. But it does, yeah. And I think that's why I love Disrupt, and your Ignite event as well. Is Ignite,
Inspire,
isn't it?
Inspire.
Gives people the opportunity to just speak for 5 minutes, and it's less terrifying.
Yeah. And once
unless I make you open.
Yes. Yeah, well, it's still terrifying because you still got to prepare. But once you've spoken once, Mike Taylor's a great example, actually. So Mike Taylor ran his event, 12 years ago, and he's always had good diversity on stage. He has always sought out people who were not really well known. So when Bill spoke at Mike's event, Bill wasn't speaking at any other events. That was one of the early gigs for him. And then you'd have people who were quite well known in the space alongside them. You'd have agency owners who weren't well known on stage. So he put a lot of effort into his events. I think it's laziness, Glenn, sometimes.
Yeah. Here's a question then. So sometimes does the topic influence the diversity of the panel?
I guess.
Maybe.
Okay. If you want an expert in a very niche topic, you've got to find an expert in that topic. And if they're all men, you've got to take it. I think that's true. I don't think you can make up knowledge. I mean, what sort of thing do you mean, Glenn? What were you thinking?
Well, I wasn't thinking of anything specific. I just kind of think I was thinking more from a kind of techie point of view. So say, for instance, if it's like maybe a kind of tech event, tech recruitment event, you might find that actually the large proportion of that panel would be male, and maybe only a kind of a minority of that would be female. So sometimes the subject defines the panel itself.
You and I both know at Spring that it was probably 2/3 men. There was still a third of very good women there.
Yeah, I guess it comes down to that encouragement piece, Louise. I mean, what advice would you give to people that feel like they've got something to say, but if I'm honest, are kind of petrified at the idea of standing up in front of people and kind of talking about that?
Women say they don't have anything to say when you ask them. They've been doing recruitment for 2 or 3 years, and I haven't got anything to share. Oh, I get this all the time. I'm like,
what advice would you give those women then?
Well, it's a bit of a slower burn because Katrina and I have got quite different styles, if I'm honest. So
in other words, Louise is beautifully British and I'm blunt Australian.
I suspect we handle things quite differently. I think that this isn't just for women. I think this is anybody who's concerned about speaking. I think that they going to an event first as a delegate helps. Understanding how the event's going to be, sitting in the audience, I definitely think that helps. If you want to get on stage quickly, you can't do that because you can't wait an entire year for the next annual conference of whatever to come around. I do recognise that's not always realistic. I think that if you can speak to an event organiser who's warm to you and have a conversation about what they're really looking for, so that you start to tick more of those boxes. Having said that, I don't think that all event organisers really make the right effort to get speakers. They'll contact somebody by email and say, do you want to speak about this topic? And if they say no, they just leave them and move on to the next person. That doesn't help you as a speaker. You need to understand what's expected of you so that you can start to recognise that you can give that. It's very difficult to have the confidence to say, I wonder whether I'd be better on a panel, or another thing women are more comfortable with sometimes is the interview situation. So I've got some knowledge, I'm not quite sure how to impart it, but if you interview me, you'll
Yeah.
get that. But who asks that? You have to have a certain level of confidence to say, I wonder whether there's another way we can do this. Can we do this as a two-hander with somebody else?
Yeah.
See, that's where we need to get more of that out there, don't we? More. Because I actually think the panels are harder. Like Glenn's trying to speak right now and I'm cutting him off. That can happen on stage. Sorry, Glenn. Love you, really. But that can happen on stage. And if you're not a domineering female like I am, you won't necessarily cut the men off. No offense, generalizing. But often it is the men that will go to answer first. And you see the women sit back and not answer or not grab for the microphone.
It's a true point. You could sit on that panel and not say anything, and that could actually crush your confidence, because people just naturally, some people are just better in that kind of panel-based Q&A scenario. Whereas, you know, somebody like me, I need to kind of digest what's been said and then think about a response. Whereas Katrina just be like, bang, yeah, I'm on that topic straight away.
But it's also knowing you've got to give an answer. So I think I actually find panels harder, because it's like, I can't just waffle on for 10 minutes now. I need to give an answer in a few sentences and pass it to the next person. But that's come from having done some. But I would much rather get up and do a 20-minute, 40-minute talk to get all my points across, personally. You know, sometimes you'll get requests for, could you fly to the other side of the planet to talk for 10 minutes in a panel? And I'm like, no. Like,
no, I think panels are really hit and miss. But panels are not, you know, when you speak on stage for 20 minutes, you know what you're getting. You've got slides behind, you've got a microphone, and you can hold your cards or you can't. You know as a speaker what you're getting with that. With a panel, you don't. And I think that's down to event organisers as well. So the most important person on the panel is the panel host, who makes sure everyone answers the questions, who makes sure they frame the questions properly. So you ask person one a question, and then by question 4, you have to re-ask the question so that they're answering the first question you ask. And rubbish panel hosts completely screw up panels. So I think as an event organiser...
And it is a hard job.
Oh, it is really tricky. You don't just get to swan. I did do all my swans around the lectern. I just felt so great. And then afterwards, I'm looking at myself thinking, what's it doing? Because you do have to be concentrating the whole time on what they are saying. So I think that bad panels must be crushing. Like you say, I travel for an hour, 2 hours to get there. I sit in the audience nervous as hell, and I've got what I think is going to be a 40-minute slot on stage, and I only get to answer 3 questions, and then someone speaks over me. I mean, that's got to be devastating.
Yeah, and and it's happened to me in early days. We were not meant to be just talking about men, but Alan Walker is very good at that. If you want to learn from somebody, he's incredibly good.
Yeah.
Like, watch some of his panels back.
Okay.
He's just very good panel host. Yeah. And he makes sure everybody gets an opportunity to speak. He'll notice if you're trying to speak, and that's a lot of it. You might be leaning in for the microphone, and you've got to notice it.
If I was hosting a panel, I wouldn't feel awkward about putting Alan on as my male panel host if I knew he had a lot to offer in terms of getting the most out of the other panel members. But then what I wouldn't do is I wouldn't have 3 other blokes on the panel and 1 woman. I'd be making absolutely certain that I had at least 50-50. Ideally 3 women, 1 man, and Alan.
So how do you go about ensuring diversity at each event without it being a kind of tick box exercise? Sounds like I know it's a bit of
it's the worst.
It's
I mean,
really
it's kind of.
I literally get so excited. I'll message Louise going, "What do you think of this speaker? Oh, they're great. Blah blah. Excellent. Tick tick." And I'm like, "Oh, I can't believe I'm doing that." But I have to, or I get people have goes at me from across the world.
It must be really challenging, right? Is there any way of doing that, or is it's just being conscious of it, and that's as much as you can kind of do?
So I think that unfortunately, until we get to the stage where people are just doing this because they're doing it, we have to tick some boxes. And this brings us on to the broader issue of diversity. It's not just about men and women, it's about other forms of diversity. And then you might say, so there's conversations you have behind the script, the scenes, exactly like I'm saying with Katrina, where you might say, oh, I've got so-and-so, and I know that he's got mental health issues, but no one's going to see that on stage. But I know, when he's white and he's 40 and he's bloke, but I know. And I think that it's a mix of things. I hope that people trust people like Katrina and I to have tried to be as diverse and inclusive, because new speakers are just as important as, you know, a new bloke speaking is as important as a established woman speaking. So I suppose you sort of maybe have a matrix in your mind of how your ideal event would look. If I was an event organizer, like some of the ones Katrina and I see, who are still getting this wrong, totally cocking it up, I'd probably give them a little list which says 50% ought to be women, 50% ought to be men. Let's get a bit more diversity in there. Because if you get to the end of the day, and so there's an event organised by someone who is super well known in this space, did a really nice, I don't want to use the word retreat, but that type of event, and they were mostly men again.
Yeah. And it was frustrating because I was looking at that and looking at the type of male, because they were inspirational speakers, and going, I know 3 women that could do that straight up, because they're not in the recruitment domain, but the speakers weren't. And it was like, frustrating. But I mean, being honest, Glenn, I sit and I go, because with Disrupt I'll have anywhere between 12, and actually London's now going to be 16 from next year, because there's just too many speakers. I need to get them in, and what's an extra 5 minutes, you know? Anyway, so I do literally go, I want in-house, a consultant side, and I put like myself and Louise, we're all supply side, even though we might be working with lots of businesses in-house. So I split it like that, and then I sit and go, right, have I at least got 50-50 male female? And then I go, right, do I have my ethnic diversity? Do I have gender diversity? Do I have neuro? And if I'm not always going to have it, but I do have to sit and go, like, how am I doing? And try really hard to get that mix. But then you also want the mix of topics. So it's
and you want the best speakers. It's not easy.
Well, I'm lucky because it's 5 minutes, so I can have a brand spanking new speaker, and actually often my brand spanking new speakers are some of the best. Like, I've been quite mind blown.
This is what I was going to say. Some events encourage new speakers. Some events don't, because they're either paid for or quite expensive. So therefore, you know, they know the crowd is expecting a certain established group of people on a panel speaking. So that often must influence.
But there is a way around that, Glenn. There's a way around that. So I do an event, a job board event, which has so many challenges. One of them is that the senior people in job boards are nearly all men. That's just the way it is. So what do? I pick someone who's a very, very low down account manager. No, that's not going to work. So I've definitely already got more men than women. The people who speak a lot are always speaking a lot. So what I did last year was I introduced some TED Talk type sessions. So 2 sessions where I had 4 speakers, each doing a 20-minute slot. So it's almost like your events, Katrina, where they're only giving up, the audience is giving up a smaller amount of investing a smaller amount of time in a speaker. So the expectation's slightly lower. I pitched it correctly. So these are people from niche job boards, or with a specific story, and they're only talking for 20 minutes. So I can still have my big keynotes who are more well known, who have to be men, because they are the people. Last year, I ended. But
you had that struggle. Oh, sorry.
Go on. Last year, I ended up with a panel at the end, which was all men, and I had no choice because they were all the most senior people in the job boards, and I didn't go, I'm not going to do this. It's not me. I just had to do it. So
she did have an awesome
keynote last year, though. That's cool.
But this year, I know you've been working so hard to find, and it was really specific. You needed Google for Jobs specialty, and a female, and I could have done that, but you couldn't have me because I spoke last year, which is fair. It's only fair on the audience, and it was. I know how hard you work behind the scenes to find that, to get the balance right. And it just takes effort, and asking your network and going back and getting really creative in how you find people.
That's it. I think that unfortunately, some people who organise events are focused on the wrong thing. I'm not going to say they're lazy. They're just, maybe some are, but some are focused on the wrong thing. And I think that until we get broader diversity on stage, until we encourage new speakers to have the opportunity to speak, we're doing ourselves a disservice. I could fill an event tomorrow from people who are fab speakers and I love, and now it would still be 50-50. But 3 years ago, they've all been men.
I think the other thing that Louise and I also find interesting, which we haven't touched on, is the female speakers in the marketing department booking all men. And that happens
You've encountered that?
A lot.
Both encountered that, yeah? Okay.
Yeah. And again, that goes back to if they don't have the confidence to go, no, like, oh, I'm looking at a male, because the men will say yes and they fill their roles like that. And
it is shocking. So that is an event that we've both been involved in. And
more than one as well.
Yeah.
Mention no names.
No.
No.
So and this year I was so surprised. This is an more or less all woman marketing department with a male heavy lineup. I mean, I had a female keynote, but such a male heavy lineup. I just think it's really disappointing. What are they saying? Are they not even recognising that women have a voice that should be heard? Don't understand that.
It is tough because I do both sides. So if I call them out for it, I'm then like, oh, well, you just wanted to speak and you're just annoyed you wanted to. Well, no, not necessarily. It's like, I just want to see something that's fair and that represents, well, actually, yeah, maybe I think it represents the general population more than the recruitment industry, but
yes, yeah, so that's the people who are delegates. The delegates. I mean, broadly speaking, as a delegate, you're going to be thinking where your future lies by what's on stage. And if you don't, I mean, we know this. If you don't see yourself represented in a position like that, then aspirationally you think, someone like me doing that job. Yeah, we know it. We already know that. And that's what I think what Speaking for All is about helping people to find their voice so that they up their aspirations. I mean, not everyone wants to speak on stage, obviously, but to position yourself better and to get better profile, yes, you're better to be seen.
It's funny, you don't speak on stage, really, do you? You run the event and do the MC bit.
Yeah.
You don't really. No, yeah, Glenn and I both do.
But this I speak, and some women say no to these. Some women don't want to do the live chat stuff either.
I would much rather say yes to a live chat, even if Stephen O'Donnell's asking me really strange questions, than do. That was really weird last week. But anyway, than do a webinar. So I'm doing a webinar for HRD Summit this week, actually. I'm doing it on Wednesday. So after I speak at the firm. And you're delivering to dead air and nobody tells you about that. So the very first time you do one, you can't see your beautiful faces looking back, giving the energy.
I think the great thing about
you feel like you're bored. You like that. You think they're bored. It's like, oh God, what am I doing? Yeah, they're tough. I wouldn't do that as a first gig, guys. I wouldn't.
Well, the Speaking for All group does. I mean, I've noticed myself through it. There are kind of slightly more smaller scale speaking events, events for first time speakers, like kind of DBR and stuff like that. So it's a great group to be part of. If you're starting to think about you want to sort of talk at an event and you want to want to get your message out there. So it's certainly I think there's a fairly healthy number of people joined already, but I'm sure you would welcome a few more, right?
Yeah, please fill out the questions when you apply, because we just won't let you in otherwise. Because they just ask to make sure that because we want it to be HR and recruitment focused, this group, but it's not a big group and we're not overly active. It's like we'll share stuff when we're ready, and that's what I think is nice. It doesn't get really noisy, and you're like, oh God, another group. It's busy at the right time.
First time event organizer, Louise, right? Somebody that's trying to sort of think about, because that's often where it starts, right? With those first couple of events, you almost set the template for the ones that you're going to do thereafter. So if somebody's looking to do a kind of first event, or they've done their first event and they're thinking, oh, I could have maybe infused a bit more kind of diversity into the panel, what kind of advice would you give them? What tips?
Well, it's a little bit like recruitment. So use your sources. So ask Katrina, ask me, ask other people. Some event organisers might tell you to get stuffed, whereas other people will offer you advice on. I definitely won't. No, and it won't just be I use this person, use them again. It will be some people I've got in my pipeline who aren't right for the events I've got now. The other thing which is like recruitment is look where these people are speaking online. I don't mean speaking formally. And I just think that's what's so crazy about this. If you if you want recruiting experts, go into a recruiting Facebook group, a LinkedIn group. Yes, the male voices are still louder. So in Hung's group, in Recruiting Brain Food, he did a little survey of who'd contributed the most. The top 10 people are all men, or maybe the top 9 were. But look at the people who are contributing slightly less, but just still saying valuable things. I can't tell you how much time I spend searching on LinkedIn when I should be socialising with my family or asleep, looking at people who have got the keywords I'm looking for in their profiles.
Yeah,
exactly
like speaker?
well, not all women put speaker in their profiles,
no.
But
and some don't, even when it's suggested that they should do.
Yes,
and then they complain they're not getting speaking opportunities. And you go, well, you haven't got the word there, even though you speak. Yeah, that's another conversation.
But I don't. But I don't. So I wanted somebody to speak about AI and assessment. I mean, I literally probably spent 2 hours doing a search for people like that, and then I knew I needed another woman, so I only looked at the women. It's not rocket science. So as a new event organizer, it is. We should get this right in the recruitment space, because it is very much like recruiting. You're headhunting for these people. You put adverts out for them. So you ask in active Facebook groups. You ask on your LinkedIn profile. Does anyone have an opinion about Google for Jobs? And then you find people who do.
I think another piece of advice I'd give is, what's your motivation? So with me for Disrupt, it's about that community feel. As you know, I want you guys to come back, and, you guys do as often as you can. And if I get the professional speakers that I know are just doing as a tick box exercise, then I'm like, okay, they're going to give a very polished presentation, but is it actually going to resonate with the audience? Is it actually, are they asking the question? So I will always say, what does your audience want to learn? What do you want me to talk about that they've asked for? And make sure my presentation gives value. Whereas I find a lot of them just do it for tick box, got video, I'm out of here. And is that what you want? So, so that's just something to be aware of. As a new time, I'd just be a little bit cautious of that, because I've been burnt with that quite a few times.
But actually, it's not crazy when you speak to people to say, and how will you promote this within your own network? And, if you're going to be speaking at my event, can I ask how you will share it? Will you put this out in these ways? That's down.
This is Louise reminding me to do that, actually.
Yeah. Well, I do that. I do a little picture of every speaker with their title, and you've got your Disrupt HR format. We do one for each person, and then I guess I want them.
Because I'm too lazy to do 14.
Oh, it's so time consuming. But when you're organising a new event, once you've found those speakers, flipping heck, shout about them and get them to shout about them. And I think being upfront with people. Have we got time to quickly talk about being upfront with people?
Yeah, totally.
So we've decided the show's now 40 minutes, because we can't. I think we've just hit 30. We're incapable of staying in it.
That's all right. Keep going. So
just roll with it.
So I think that this is advice for event organisers and for speakers. It's about knowing exactly what you're getting into. So I talk about the way you're going to share things. I'm astonished at how many speakers don't ask me how big the audience is going to be, whether they're actually going to be on the stage, whether they'll be filmed, when I want their slides, who else is going to be in the session. So I think as an event organiser, it's useful to share all that, because I can't imagine what it must be like for a speaker to stand up having made an assumption that the audience is going to be 200 people to find out it's in a basement room and there's 12 of you. Which is
I've had seven recently.
And I went to an event recently where I don't think the speaker knew the size of the event when they rocked up to talk. And that's got to be written all over your face. Oh, it's just you, is it? Or even worse, actually, is probably thinking you're delivering to a small group, maybe interactive session, and finding you on main stage and you can't see anybody, and you're not allowed to take your piece of paper on, because not like you, Katrina, not everyone wants people with their notes on stage. But if you don't communicate that up front and you just whip them out their hand, you're like, in the headlights. So information sharing is really
also important. On that, if you do start speaking, get your slides in on time, because we as event organisers all talk. So if you're, I don't mean you, Glenn, I mean somebody else who's cracking into, somebody who probably won't even watch this show, cracking into the space and had me so stressed about slides. And I, you know, again, I have a lot of speakers. I need the slides in. It's really important because I have to put them all together, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, but I would then, if somebody said to me, oh, what do you think of this? I'd be like, nightmare, high maintenance. You're going to find it really tough to get the deck in. That's going to stress you. We have so much other stuff going on as well as your PowerPoint. So, you know, I think that's a really important one. Yours is just the music, Glenn, but I got it to work in London, and the video is awesome, by the way.
Cool.
Yeah, it'll be out when it gets loaded.
I just remember the first time I think I submitted my slides about 2 weeks late, and you were like, "You're my friend, but you're not making this easy." Yeah, you're not making this easy at all.
But if you are a new speaker and you don't have a friend and it's not a network and you're wanting to crack in, we all talk. So if you are, you know, if you're difficult, it does come back. You do lose stuff. So
it also adds to the stress of you as a speaker. Is if you're preparing your slides 2 days before and you've ignored everything the event organisers asked you to do, well, you haven't prepared. You're not going to be on stage confident.
Louise, that is exactly it. I underestimated the amount of time it would take me to get the slides together and actually knit the narrative together. I completely underestimated. It was the first time I'd spoken at Disrupt. I completely underestimated the time it would take me.
It's a 5-minute presentation. How hard can it be? It takes all day.
Yeah, but
it takes longer than a keynote.
Yeah, definitely. It's you know, because you start like here with all the information, and you think 5 minutes, I have to distill it down to this, and it actually has to really resonate. So, you know, some advice for any new speakers: for God's sake, make sure you allow time to kind of get that together, because otherwise you go on stage and obviously you're massively stressed out. That's somebody phoning to apologise about not putting their slides in, right?
I'm sorry, Lou, that was me. I'm seeing you live. I'm just going to go home.
It's my mum. It's my mum. You're on telly, Lou.
My slides will be there in an hour.
It's going to ring again in a minute.
Hang it up. Is that your home? You have a home phone. What's the world coming to?
I do.
So we've just got a couple of minutes left because we are definitely running over as ever. Is there anything that you want to say other than come join? It's hashtag Speaking for All on Facebook, in case you're wondering.
Totally.
Have you got any, Louise, pearls of wisdom that you thought, I really want to share this? I know you wrote notes.
Yeah, I did. No, we've covered them all. So I guess my point to this is that I know it's tough organising events, but just be a decent human being and think about getting a range of people on stage. Nobody wants to hear exactly the same people every single time. If you want to speak at an event, ask for advice. So it is tough. Not all event organisers are lovely, warm and friendly like we are, but we are. So come and talk to us. And I think that joining a group like that is a step in the right direction. Just asking questions, not being embarrassed to say, I just honestly don't know where to start. It's the key, isn't it? It's making yourself available.
And actually, just something, I get it, right? And I'm sure that you guys get it as well. There is a lovely thing about being in the limelight. You know, it's my highest value, speaking and being heard. So I love it. I love it. Put me on stage, very happy. However, there are times when perhaps instead of you speaking, it should be one of your team speaking. Maybe there's someone you can encourage through and you're taking. So sometimes it's nice to go, you know what, not me. It should be this person. So now I'm going to speak at your conference. I won't speak again for a couple of years. That's always the case. That's how it works, because it needs to be fair for the audience. And it's the same as, is there someone in your team you should be encouraging up? So we see that a lot as well. Oh, I'll do it. Well, actually, I was more interested in someone in your team.
It's very difficult though, isn't it? Because I think that we, like you say, once you enjoy being on stage and you know you've got Christ, you've got an entire book's worth of message to give. Why wouldn't you want to take those opportunities? But I do think that it's Speaking for All is about new voices, colours, gender, and other types of diversity. So
it's cool. We're excited about it. It's still going a year on. Right, on that note, thank you again, Louise Tribes, for joining us again 1 year later. Thank you very much. Thank you,
for having me.
Oh, you're most welcome. We, of course, shall be back same time next week, 10 a.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. London time. I really should call it what it actually is.
BST.
There is only London. Sorry, I'm dreadful. It's my adopted home. You guys are out there outside London somewhere outside the M25. But anyway, we shall see you same time next week. Have a great week, people. Bye.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.